Hello. Joining us this evening is the Robertson Professor of Media Studies and Director of the Center for Media and Citizenship at the University of Virginia, Siva Vaidhyanathan. He specializes in media policy, history, technology, and law, and he is a prominent media theorist. Dr. Vaidhyanathan worked as a journalist for 5 years before receiving his PhD in American Studies from the University of Texas at Austin. Since then, he has created quite the repertoire. He has written for many periodicals, been featured in tons of podcasts, and has appeared in several documentaries. He spent some time with Jon Stewart, appearing on The Daily Show to discuss early social network services. He was even portrayed as a character in the 2016 Public Theater in New York City play, Privacy. Several of you in this room may know him for his books like The Googleization of Everything and Why We Should Worry, and of course his most recent work, Antisocial Media, How Facebook Disconnects Us and Undermines Democracy. Speaking of Facebook, you can find Dr. Vaidhyanathan on Facebook and Twitter, sharing and retweeting critical work in his field, as well as the occasional joke. Here today to discuss his most recent book and just how Facebook disconnects us and undermines our democracy, I present to you Dr. Siva Vaidhyanathan.
Hi, good evening. It's really nice to be here. Flew across the entire continent today to be here, so if I get a little bit foggy, that's why, so I apologize in advance. But I'm sufficiently caffeinated, so I think I can make it through. It's been a wacky couple of years for Facebook. Just to recap the last 2 years, almost exactly 2 years. So right before the 2016 election, a couple of news stories started popping up about some interesting phenomena that were happening on Facebook, in Facebook groups, on Facebook pages, and things that were shooting around Facebook. And at the time, this phenomenon seemed to be dubbed or diagnosed fake news. And that was never a really good description for what was really happening on Facebook. What was really happening on Facebook was a whole variety of pollution. Posts that were not, let's say the right way to say it is, not sincere in their attempt. They were efforts to play with groups in the United States that had commitments, political and social commitments. Some of these political and social commitments were on the left, some were on the right. Some were affiliated with Black Lives Matter, some were for white supremacy. And along the way, there was this whole flood of content that was actually intended to draw eyeballs to pages where ads were sold, like a total for-profit effort. So there actually were these fake news sites, right? This very small portion of this phenomenon of garbage was created to actually generate money. A lot of these pages came from places like Macedonia. So again, some really enterprising journalists started exposing this stuff in the late summer of 2016. And they hadn't fully connected it to the election in 2016, but it seemed to be accelerating as interest in the election was mounting. So pretty soon, people started putting all this together. And they realized something really interesting was happening on Facebook. Now, of course, the 2016 election happens. There's tremendous analysis, right? Deep analysis of how certain states went for Donald Trump when they were expected to go for Hillary Clinton. 3 states in particular, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And you could throw Florida in there too, although Florida was a toss-up from the beginning. But, you know, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were supposed to go for Hillary Clinton. They went for Donald Trump, and that is why Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Right? Those 3 states, those electoral votes, put him over. The margin in those 3 states combined was about 80,000 votes. You can put 110,000 people in the University of Michigan football stadium. So something interesting happened in this campaign, right? I don't know if you had this experience. I did. Certainly not everybody in the country did. But in the weeks after the 2016 election, I felt like I didn't know my country as well as I thought, right? If I just told you I have a PhD in American Studies, turns out I didn't really understand America as much as I thought I did, right? So what good was that degree, right? I study media. Turns out I didn't understand the political dynamics of media as much as I thought I did. Or at least that was my sort of gut reaction. Like, well, but my bigger reaction was, what good am I? You know, what difference does it make that I, write about Silicon Valley? What difference does it make that I teach some of America's best prepared and most motivated and disciplined students, right? The students who already have everything going for them, right? It was just one of those moments where you go, oh my gosh, like maybe I should have become an immigration lawyer because of what's certain to come ahead of us, right? Which turned out to actually be the case. So I was in this real funk. A friend of mine was also in a funk. He had been a magazine editor in New York, worked for one of the big glossy magazines by one of the big chains, had worked there for nearly 20 years. He had edited some of the most important journalistic pieces of the last 20 years. But in the magazine world, there's only so much you can do. In the wake of that election, he quit his job because he wanted to find something more substantial to do. And he started driving up and down the East Coast, talking to old friends, wanted to have a talk, like what the heck can we do? What happened? How can we make a difference going forward? So he was visiting me in Charlottesville, and we were talking, and we went through that conversation everybody seemed to be having. How the heck did Donald Trump win all these electoral votes when he didn't even seem to be running a campaign? Well, as it happens, I had been collecting a lot of studies and a lot of articles, right, academic studies and journalistic articles about social media for years, largely because of what I teach. And I had never thought about writing a book about this stuff. I was going to write a book about the role of corporations in America. That was going to be my next book. I taught classes on privacy, taught classes on intellectual property, and taught classes on digital media in general. So I was mostly collecting this stuff for what I teach. Well, anyway, he asked me this, like, how the heck did this happen? Because I don't know if you remember 2 years ago, around this time, the journalistic analysis of the campaign was that Clinton was spreading the map. She was going up, right? That's how political journalists describe it. She was going up, which means putting television commercials up, paying for television commercials in Arizona, right? Spreading the map. Nevada looked like a sure thing. It turned out she won Nevada, right? But Nevada was supposed to be a toss-up. She was winning easily in Nevada, it seemed. And then she was going to spread the map to Arizona. And there were even a couple polls that showed Texas in a single-digit margin, spreading the map. And so she starts spending money. She didn't spend money in Texas, but she did spend money in Arizona, right? And by money, it was visible money. It was television commercials, radio commercials, the things that political reporters had been trained for years to watch. Donald Trump, silent. He was not up anywhere, it seemed. He was not up in Florida. He was not up in Ohio to any large degree. Not like Romney in 2012. Not like McCain in 2008. He didn't seem to be running a campaign. He was hopping on his plane and showing up where he could gather a crowd, where he could get the instant feedback that he so desires, but he wasn't running anything close to a traditional campaign. How the heck did he surgically move those 3 states, or 4 if you count Florida? By the way, the margin in Florida was 110,000 votes. The same number of people can fit in the University of Michigan football stadium, right? How the heck did he move that many voters in just the right places to get it done? Well, there's an answer, and that answer actually came from the Trump campaign itself, because they weren't coy about this. They said it very straight up. We ran our campaign on Facebook. Facebook won the election for Donald Trump. That's not me saying it. That's the people who worked at the highest levels of the Trump campaign, including his son-in-law, who oversaw their digital operations. So what did they do to move votes? Well, they didn't do anything nefarious. Well, they might have, but that wasn't what really seemed to matter, right? What they did was use the advertising system that Facebook provides. The same advertising system that seems to be listening to you when you talk around your phone, but it actually doesn't. It just reads your mind so well because of all the other things you've done on your phone. right? The advertising system that can precisely target a good or a service or a political candidate or a social movement to the people who are interested in it, who have expressed anything close to interest in a subject. This advertising system is astoundingly accurate and persuasive and profitable. It can identify groups as small as 20, and I'll get into a little bit how this was. So basically what Trump's campaign had been doing, in lieu of putting expensive television ads up in big markets like Miami and Philadelphia and Columbus, although they did a bit of that, what they really were doing was very narrowly tailoring ads at small groups of voters. They were saying, you know what? We know there are men of Haitian descent who are registered voters in Miami-Dade County. There are a few thousand of them, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 of them. And you know what? They might remember all the big promises that Bill Clinton made after the last earthquake in Haiti, when he went down there to try to generate money and interest in fixing the island, and it didn't turn out so well. Maybe we remind them of that, and maybe they will be disenchanted, disinclined to vote on election day because they don't want to reward someone else named Clinton. Let's try that. And let's try 10, 20, 100 different versions of that ad. Some in French, some in English. Let's see what works. See what they click on. See what the reaction is. See whether they comment on it. Measure the engagement. You could go to Michigan, you could say, look, we've got this collection of voters, women who generally vote Democratic, maybe have voted Democratic in the past 2 elections, but it turns out they're not so convinced that abortion should be legal in the United States. Maybe they have qualms about abortion. You can separate out that whatever number it is, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 women who might not be pro-choice, and target an ad very precisely at them to just try to undermine their support a little bit, or maybe move them from being potential Clinton voters to being potential Trump voters. Maybe you can find people who haven't voted, again, 1,000, 10,000, whatever, in a state like Wisconsin, people who haven't voted in 3 elections. But they have expressed through Facebook frustration. Maybe they've gone through 4 jobs in the past 5 years. Maybe they've seen a reduction in their standard of living. Maybe Trump's economic message and his protectionist message can appeal to them. And again, pull people away. Maybe motivate people who didn't vote to vote. Very surgically. Something you can't do on television, you can't do on radio. The best you can do on radio is you can say, we think this kind of person listens to this country station, and we think this kind of person listens to this hip-hop station. We think this kind of person listens to this talk radio station. And that's not very accurate, right? And you're basically operating in stereotypes. But through Facebook, you can really chop up the electorate in very fine tranches and then experiment with whatever message works. And this is exactly what they did, and it doesn't cost very much, because you only pay for the ads that actually work if you're running ads on Facebook. People actually have to click on them to be charged for them. So if they fail, you didn't lose anything. It was a really ingenious system. But think about this. In a democracy, in a democratic republic, we're talking about a major form of political communication that is inscrutable, that cannot be interrogated, cannot be responded to, has no accountability. Let's say you and I are running against each other for city council. And I happen to know that there are about 500, it's going to be a close race, right? There are only maybe 10,000 voters for this race in city council in this town. There are about 500 small business owners who have expressed a lot of concern about shoplifting. And about 48 hours, maybe 72 hours before the election, I start buying Facebook ads and carefully targeting them at people who are shopkeepers, shop owners in this town. And I say, you know what? My opponent is a shoplifter, has a history of shoplifting, is soft on shoplifting. Any one of those messages, right? Whatever's most believable, right? Now, if I had pulled out a television ad and put it up on television, every journalist in town would have seen it, my opponent would have seen it, and there would have been instant blowback. I would have had to answer for whatever lies I was spreading, whatever trouble I was causing. Maybe not enough time to make a difference, right? But there would have been some accountability some accountability, as there often are with television ads. Facebook ads, there's no accountability. You would not have, if you're my opponent, you would not have known what was coming till it was too late. Again, I don't have to move many voters. I just have to convince a few hundred not to vote, or a few hundred who might have voted for you to vote for me. And in a close election, that's all it takes. So imagine you're picking out these very small portions of Wisconsin, very small portions of Michigan, very small portions of Philadelphia. And a lot of what you're doing, and the Trump campaign was very clear about this, is reducing enthusiasm for your opponent, reducing enthusiasm for Secretary Clinton. And they did that explicitly in Milwaukee, in Detroit, in Philadelphia. And again, those 3 states, a total of 80,000 votes. That's pretty stunning. But again, no democratic accountability. It's a very unhealthy thing in a democratic republic. Regardless of who became president, that's a whole other conversation. If Hillary Clinton had won using the same methods with no accountability, no way to respond, no way to deliberate, no way to argue, it would have been just as bad for democracy. That's really important to think about, because I'm talking here about democracy, not about necessarily who wins. All right, so this is the conversation I'm having. It didn't sound like a conversation because it sounds like a monologue, and I apologize. Conversation I'm having with my friend in my living room in Charlottesville just before Thanksgiving, November 16, 2016, and he says, wait, you have to write a book that says this. And I said, well, I've never wanted to write a book about Facebook. He said, no. Clearly Facebook is, we know it's big, we know it's rich, we know it's important, but people need to understand this dynamic. And I thought about it, and I looked to my wife, and she nodded her head. She said, yeah, it's a good idea, and she really regrets that now. I said, I guess I have to, right? But how was I going to do this? I was not going to write a book that just told the story I just told you. Why? Because journalism did a great job on that. And here's the big thing about Facebook that I had been sort of seething about all the previous months with all this talk about fake news and whatnot. There's nothing about Facebook that we have learned in the past 2 years that my community of social media scholars were not all over 5 or 10 years ago. So fast forward to March of 2018, the New York Times and the Observer in England worked together on a story. They broke, it's big, it ends up all over the news, all over cable news, all over the newspapers. Turns out that Facebook had allowed a researcher at Cambridge University to create a personality quiz that millions of people took, discover your personality. And through that quiz, Facebook had allowed the quiz developer to get intimate data, behavioral data on more than 87 million Americans. And then that researcher had given that data, or sold that data, to a political consulting firm called Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica was founded by a hedge fund billionaire, reclusive hedge fund billionaire named Robert Mercer, who was a big supporter of Ted Cruz, and then later Donald Trump. One of their members of the board of directors of Cambridge Analytica is a gentleman named Steve Bannon, and I apologize for using the word gentleman. The CEO of Cambridge Analytica is this guy named Alexander Nix, who is a Bond villain from Central Casting, right? The guy has like an Eton and Oxbridge accent, he has fine suits, and he works for the worst people in the world. He works for authoritarian leaders in places like Kenya. He worked for the Brexit election. He's quite the fellow. You should, if you Google him, Alexander Nix, Cambridge Analytica, you'll see some of his videos. He's amazing. He's like, the point here is, Cambridge Analytica got all this data, and they promised to do this thing called psychometric profiling, where they would, because they knew all about you, because you took that personality quiz, right? They could figure out what kind of person you are, and they would label you on this matrix of behaviors. And then they could tailor ads toward that matrix. That's what they promised their clients they could do with all of this Facebook data. And this was the big story. Oh my gosh, Facebook let this company get all of this data. Well, in my community of social media scholars, we were going, wait. Yeah, sounds bad, 87 million profiles. And by the way, this happens because Facebook not only gives access to the people who took the quiz, but to all of their friends, whether all of their friends know that their data is going to this company or not. But here's the thing, in my community we're saying, this was standard practice. This was how Facebook's been doing business for years. Facebook from 2010 to 2015 had an explicit policy that if you develop an application that runs on Facebook, like a game or a quiz, that you would get all of this data, behavioral data from all the people who installed and used the game or the quiz, and all of their friends. That exponentially ramps up to several 100 million people in certain cases. If you played Farmville, if you played Words with Friends, if you played Mafia Wars, you basically gave away all your friends' data. And you didn't know it, right? There's small print that you should have read, but I'm sure you read, right? Right? And basically, so again, people in my community, we've been screaming about this for years. Hey everybody, don't play Farmville. Don't play Mafia. We were saying this. We were also saying, hey Federal Trade Commission, hey Congress, start paying attention to this. This is some bad behavior. In 2012, the Obama campaign developed an app that was tied in with Facebook. And if you were a volunteer for the Obama campaign, you were asked to log in through Facebook. Give your Facebook credentials to the Obama campaign. Because of course, that was how the Obama campaign would spread their message among your like-minded friends. So, whether you knew it or not, if you did this, you opened up not only your behavioral data and your entire history, but all of your friends to the Obama campaign. The Obama campaign had data on more than 100 million Americans. And in 2012, I was part of a small group of scholars who was trying to get some attention on this. We were calling journalists, we were talking to people in Congress, we were saying, okay, listen, a head of state has a political organization with intimate, detailed data on 100 million citizens. This is not healthy. This is a level of surveillance we have never seen. And the response was, what are you worried about? It's Barack Obama, right? And I voted for the guy twice. I thought he was probably the best president of my lifetime. That's not the point. It didn't have to be Barack Obama. It could have been Donald Trump. Now, as it turns out, by 2015, Facebook's advertising system was so successful, they decided we don't want to dump this data anymore to attract application developers. We're going to hoard it. So whatever people were using to profile users for marketing through that data, which is really how the companies that made all those games made money, Facebook said, we're just going to keep it all in-house. So as a result, you can't take that data out anymore since 2015. And Cambridge Analytica was working with old data, by the way. So that's why in 2016, when the Hillary Clinton campaign tried to run the same system and use fresh data, they couldn't get it out of Facebook. So they relied on Obama 2012 data largely, and they tried to update it by going door to door and using phone calls. Very tedious process. Unsurprisingly, the vaunted ground game of the Clinton campaign in 2016 turned out to be a lot less than they had promised and hoped. But an interesting thing was also going on in 2016. Facebook decided to get in the political consulting business without saying that. They called it advertising consulting. Facebook embedded Facebook staff in the campaigns of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And these Facebook staff met with the people who were doing the advertising of both these campaigns and told them, gave them tips on how best to manage the Facebook advertising system, how to do that precise targeting, how to do what they call A/B testing with two different versions of ads to see which one generates the best response. Turns out the Clinton campaign, they were like, we got this. We've all run campaigns before. Many of us worked for 2 winning Obama campaigns. We've worked on winning Senate and House campaigns. We're professionals. And you might remember that Donald Trump couldn't hire any professionals. No legitimate, experienced political operatives in the Republican Party would work for Donald Trump through the summer of 2016. None of them wanted to be affiliated at the time, except for Paul Manafort, who hadn't run a campaign since about 1988, since 1988. He was happy to come back from Ukraine and run a campaign for a while. Didn't work out so well for him, it turns out, or the Republic. But the thing is that the Trump campaign had no professionals. What they had were people who had worked in social media marketing for the Trump organization. All they knew how to do was buy Facebook ads. So they said to the Facebook guys, come on in, show us how to work this system, show us how to maximize it. Another reason I think it's safe to argue that Facebook it's not the only thing that made a difference. There were about 100 things that made the difference. But it's one of the major factors in who became president after 2016. But that raises an important question. People who worked at Facebook were basically operating as political consultants for free. They were donating this service. Now, if I were a political consultant, or you were a political consultant, and you made money doing stuff like that, and you went and worked for a campaign for free, you would be essentially donating your time to the campaign. You would be making a campaign contribution, and you should have to report it as a campaign contribution, an in-kind campaign contribution, just like if you had lent a pickup truck to a campaign, or lent your professional time in any way. But Facebook got away with this by helping both sides. So that's another important part of this. So here's what I decided to do when I decided to write this book. I decided that I needed to revive all of this scholarship out of my community that really deeply understood Facebook in ways that had not made it out into the public yet. This was one of those rare cases where I was convinced that the scholars were actually connected to the real world and the journalists were all in the ivory tower. And that's really what I saw, right? When it came to social media, the ivory tower turned out to be Silicon Valley itself, right? They were all dazzled by the success story of Silicon Valley. If you walk through any airport between 2008 and 2016, you could not avoid the face of Mark Zuckerberg on the cover of Inc., or the cover of Fast Company, or the cover of Bloomberg Business Week, whatever it was. He was the boy wonder. He was the most wizardly of the wizards. And it was a stunning story, right? The Facebook story is pretty amazing. By the way, that movie is not the Facebook story. Don't believe that movie. Almost none of it actually happened, or didn't happen that way. But let's talk about what Facebook is now. What is true about this story is global success. Global success. Facebook has 2.2 billion users around the world. 2.2 billion users around the world. Nothing else has 2.2 billion people paying attention to it in the world. The BBC doesn't, CNN doesn't, nothing does. Facebook has more attention through more of the day than anything ever created, with the possible exception of oxygen. But that's pretty stunning if you think about that, right? That's a tremendous amount of cultural, political, and economic power. All right. So here's the thesis of my book. Now, as I said, I did not want to write a book about the 2016 election and all the stuff I just told you. That's what prompted the questions, but the really interesting story is outside the United States. We got off easy. We got relatively lucky. What's happening around the world is a lot more dangerous. And I'm not saying it's not happening here. It just hasn't happened here yet. But what's happening around the world is that Facebook is being hijacked by authoritarian and nationalist forces, intent on two things. Number one, spreading alarmist rhetoric about some other group, because that's how authoritarians and nationalists operate. Facebook's great for that. You can very quickly pick out the people most likely to be angered or motivated by whatever propaganda you're spreading against said group. whether it's immigrants from Syria, or refugees from Syria, or refugees from Honduras, or it's the Rohingya in Myanmar, it's the Muslim minority in the Philippines, whatever it is, you can generate animosity really easily, really exploit what may already be there, but amplify it and organize it through Facebook. In addition, if you're an authoritarian leader and you're in power, you can use Facebook in some really effective ways, and I will get into that later. Now here's the thing, just beyond that, how does Facebook affect all of us? It scrambles our contexts, especially our social contexts. I'll explain that in a little while too. Now here's the ultimate paradox. 2.2 billion people, they're not fools. They get something out of Facebook. They get value out of Facebook. A lot of people get a lot of value out of Facebook. My mom is on Facebook right now, I guarantee you. She is making all kinds of embarrassing comments, usually on my posts. When I post something and she says, oh, that's just like when you were 10 and you did this, right? That's my mom. And you're probably Facebook friends with her. She seems to be Facebook friends with everybody. All right. Facebook's great for my mom. My mom gets to stay in touch with people she went to grade school with. She's 74 years old. She's in touch with people she went to grade school with. She's in touch with relatives on 3 continents. She's in touch with her children who live in 3 different cities, 3 different states, because we don't always call as often as we should, right? It's great for her. She gets to tell her own stories. She gets to see pictures of, her niece's kids. Facebook's been great for me too. I'm trying to sell a book. It turns out it's really good for that. Among many other things, right? Facebook is good for you. It's good for me. It's terrible for us. Terrible for the collective. Now, I said that's a paradox. It's actually not that unusual, though. I love my car. My car's great for me. It does everything I want. Your car is probably good for you, too. Our cars are terrible for all of us. Collectively, cars are a big mistake. Individually, they make all the sense in the world. Collectively, they are terrible. And that's something I think we really need to keep in mind with this. Now, here ultimately is what I'm trying to get nailed down here. The problem with Facebook is Facebook. If you look at all of the problems that have emerged from Facebook over the past 3 years, or we've learned about in the past 3 years, the data dumps, the massive surveillance systems, the fact that the advertising system is so powerful and can be so easily hijacked by nefarious forces, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are 10 other issues. They're all in my book, right? Look at all of that, and it all comes down to 3 basic aspects of Facebook that are immutable. They are what makes Facebook Facebook. Facebook's scale, number 1, the fact that it does cover 2.2 billion people. Facebook's dynamism, the way it works. The fact that its algorithms amplify posts that generate strong emotion and heavy engagement. That means the more extreme your comment or your image is, the more likely it is to get response. And then the more response it gets, the more it tells Facebook's algorithms, you better spread this farther. People dig this. People are into this. So if I were to go home tonight, go back to my hotel tonight, pull up an article from The Economist magazine about how the new government in Italy is going to relate to the European Parliament. Big questions in the European Parliament, and how they're going to manage this new coalition government, populist coalition government in Italy. And I posted on Facebook. It goes nowhere. I might have a couple of friends who are into Italian politics who might click like. It's not going to, right? But it's a well-reported, well-thought-out thing, has important ramifications in the world. But if I go home tonight and I put a picture of my dog Butter up on Facebook, man, I get a lot of likes. I get lots of comments. I get people going, oh, Butter's so cute. She's so adorable. We love pictures of Butter. Pictures of Butter go all over the place. If I go home tonight and I write some crackpot stuff about how vaccines cause autism, I'm going to get 100 comments or more from my friends. Most of them telling me, I don't know what I'm talking about. They will link to the Centers for Disease Control. They will tell me I'm hurting children. They will put all kinds of stuff on there to argue with me. And a few people might be interested, and a few people might actually agree with me. And what would happen is all of that reaction to try to counter what I've put up there, that would make that post end up on more Facebook pages. It would amplify exactly what I'm doing. You can't argue with the crazy. You can't argue with the crazy. The more you argue with it on Facebook, the farther it spreads, the more people see it. And even if 1 out of 1,000 people get interested or persuaded by that post, now it's hitting 1,000 more people than it would have otherwise. Maybe one more kid doesn't get vaccinated. Maybe one more school has a measles outbreak because of that. Serious damage, right? Because you can't argue with the crazy on Facebook. And this is something that we're not used to, right? We're taught that if someone says something and you disagree with it, you should stand up and say, I disagree with that, and here's why. Right? That's how we're supposed, even when you do it in the most polite, reasonable way, like in a classroom or a debate, right? That's what we're supposed to do. In a republic especially, we're supposed to argue with each other. But that's not how Facebook is designed. Its algorithms don't allow for calm deliberation. They do not reward calm deliberation. They do not reward the sober. They reward the crazy. Hate speech, conspiracy theories, and cute puppies. Those things fly on Facebook. Deeply reported pieces about the European Union, snore, nothing. Nothing. It would go nowhere. The third thing about Facebook is something I've already discussed, the advertising system and its ability to carefully target people, precisely target people. Those three things, the scale, the algorithm, and the advertising system, are what makes Facebook Facebook. So whenever you read about Facebook trying to install some new system to cut down on what Facebook calls false news, to cut down on hate speech, to cut down on calls for genocide, these are attempts at the margin. Without addressing these three core factors, the things that make Facebook Facebook, it's a losing game. There's not much they can do. All right. By the way, here is the growth of Facebook as of the fourth quarter of 2017. We're coming up on the fourth quarter of 2018, so it's a bit dated. Just to give you a sense of how quickly Facebook rose in number of monthly active users worldwide. Pretty stunning growth. It continues to grow. Now, this is important. It is not growing in North America. It is plateaued in North America for the past, 5 quarters, zero growth. What's happening is, unsurprisingly, new users, young users are using Instagram more than Facebook. Some people are just ceasing to use Facebook, but more often than not, you have people with multiple services, they're just using Facebook less. And they're using Instagram more. And Snapchat to a degree, but not in significant enough numbers to worry Facebook. Here are the most popular social networks in the world, again, not the United States, but the world. And I think this is a really important chart. It tells you quite a bit. Facebook has, this is a little bit short of 2.2 as of January 2018. It actually hit 2.2 billion by February of 2018. By now it might be 2.27, 2.3 billion. They haven't released the new numbers yet. By the end of 2018, it might be around 2.4 billion. Okay, number one is Facebook with roughly 2.2 billion. Next is YouTube. YouTube is actually now about 1.6 billion users. And I'm not even sure you need to compare Facebook and YouTube. They do different things for us. There is a social aspect of YouTube. There's a very antisocial aspect of YouTube if you ever read the comments. But that's really what we're talking about, right? And then next is WhatsApp. WhatsApp is an instant messaging service, an encrypted instant messaging service. Very important in much of the world outside the United States, but growing in importance in the United States. WhatsApp is number 3 with 1.3 billion users. Facebook Messenger is number 4 with about 1.3 billion users. Wechat, it's now Wechat, by the way, it says 980 million. It's actually closer to 1 billion now. 1 billion users. Almost all of them are in the People's Republic of China, although a significant number of people are in the diaspora of the People's Republic of China as well, or in the sort of larger global community. For Wechat, Wechat is a fascinating service. Maybe we can get into it later. It is the biggest threat to Facebook in terms of competition. And then QQ, which also operates in China. And then Instagram with 800 million. Instagram's closer to 900 million now, by the way. Creeping up on 1 billion. So look at that. Number 1, number 3, number 4, and number 7 are all owned by Facebook. Because Instagram's owned by Facebook. So if you take out the 2 that only operate in China and you say that's a different market entirely, then you're only left with YouTube. It goes Facebook, Google, Facebook, Facebook, Facebook. Facebook wins. Facebook is almost the only thing that matters, besides the fact that Google owns YouTube, which is pretty huge, right? By the way, here's Twitter. Way down here, 330 million. It hasn't grown. Might have shrunk a little, actually. Only 330 million people. A few years ago, that would have been a huge number. 330 million people, nothing. Most of those are in North America and Western Europe, by the way. Twitter matters not at all. Don't tell the president. It really doesn't make much of a difference in the world. Well, here's the difference Twitter makes and why I didn't write a book about Twitter. Journalists are on Twitter all over the world. Activists are often on Twitter all over the world. It's a network of knowing in most of the world, but it's not used by everyday people. It's not used by most people, most places. It is used by celebrities, but that's mostly an American thing, right? So you got American celebrities, including the celebrity-in-chief, and you have journalists who are watching all these celebrities and the celebrity-in-chief, and other journalists, and you have activists. So you have this weird, distorted lens of the world if you're viewing the world through Twitter. And if you view the world through Twitter, you come to these conclusions that don't map onto reality, like that Twitter had anything to do with the uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt in 2011, which, long story, we don't have time for it, it's bunk, okay? So, here's Zuckerberg's vision for his company. This is what he wants his company to do. There's nothing in here about selling ads. There's nothing in here about making money. One of the nice things about making a lot of money is you don't have to care about money. Really, only the people with money don't care about money. But look, here's the thing. He's always thought this way. Even before, well, he kind of grew up wealthy, but let's put that to the side. Before he was a billionaire, he still thought this way. This is what he's always tried to do. He's an idealist. I've gone through hundreds of his speeches, hundreds of his Facebook posts. I've gone through every interview I could find. The guy's consistently an idealist. He truly believes that the more people use Facebook for more activities in life, the better we will all treat each other and the better we will live. He truly believes this. This is why, for almost the entire existence of Facebook, he has been doing everything he can to coerce us, to draw us, to nudge us, to engineer us into using Facebook more hours of the day. Again, for more activities all the time. Use it for shopping, please. Use it to look for a restaurant, please. Now there's Facebook entertainment, right? Little TV shows are running on Facebook. Use it for instant video broadcasts on Facebook Live, right? All of these reasons to be plugged into the Facebook world. That is his goal because he truly believes that it will all make us better because we will all be better connected. We will all treat each other well once we just get better connected. Thousands of years of human history notwithstanding, he thinks the better connected we are, the closer we are, the better we will get along. So what's Facebook scrambling? It's scrambling our personal relations, right? And when you're growing up, you quickly learn, like 4 or 5 years old, you learn that there are certain subjects and things about you will say to your friends, but not your parents, to your siblings, but not your teachers. This is how we become social. We choose what to reveal about each other to each other in very careful ways. And as you're growing up, occasionally you get burned, right? You tell the wrong thing to the wrong person, you get betrayed, and you manage that social relation through trial and error. And you learn your way to be social. But we live by managing these separate spheres. That is inappropriate talk at work, but it's totally appropriate in a bar, right? That is totally inappropriate language in church, but it's totally good playing hockey in the street, right? Social contexts matter. But on Facebook, everything is mashed up. Everything's in one big vat. All the people you played hockey with in the street, all the people you went to church with, all the people you work with, all your exes, they're all in one big vat of people. And everything you post, unless you think about it, goes to all of them. By default, it goes to all of them. You have to manage it with like some actual effort and labor if you want to make sure that your ex doesn't see the new puppy you got with your new partner, which, you know, that's a big step. Congratulations. Okay? So that's really important. The scramble's really bad, but that's intentional. Facebook wants to break down these boundaries. Mark Zuckerberg has said on a number of occasions that these social contexts are insincere, that our true selves should be the same in all contexts. We should be the same person in church as we are at work. We should be the same person at work as we are when we go camping. How is that possible? Who is this guy? Right? Well, he's a guy who never had to apply for a job, for one thing, right? Never had to report to HR. You know, I mean, if his entire life, every waking hour is spent at the office with the same group of people and they're all his age, which was his life for nearly a decade, you know, maybe that makes sense to him and most of the people who work at Facebook. But for the rest of us who live much more layered, imbricated lives, it doesn't map to us. And yet it's a system that now dominates our phones and therefore our minds and our attention all over the world. It doesn't match with how we need to live as social beings, and yet it's engineering us in this particular way. That's butter. So this was when I got her, obviously. Now this is 5 years ago. She's now 5. She just turned 5. I can't hold her anymore like this. She weighs 50 pounds. But she is just as cute, I promise you. So this is another thing Facebook does. It scrambles our time, our sense of time, right? It churns up these memories to generate that sound you just made, right? Believe me, I made the same sound when one day I opened up Facebook and this was there, right at the top. I went, oh, that was a great day, butter, right? So, and you see right here, you couldn't see, but like there really are 300 comments below this picture. Like it is the most popular thing I've ever put up on Facebook for good reason. So, you know, Facebook got that one right anyway. All right. Facebook's also scrambling our commercial spheres. Here's its net income. It's kind of a boring chart. Just know it's big, right? Facebook starts really turning a profit in 2000, like around 2011. It has its initial public offering in 2012. It's sporadic quarters with profits here. It didn't make any money all these years. It's burning through venture capital money. It starts to make money here. And whoa, look at that. Because Sheryl Sandberg joins Facebook in 2010, comes over from Google, builds this advertising system, because she actually does care about making money, and she makes money. She's brilliant, by the way. One of the most brilliant business people ever. Really, like, she knows what she's doing. Don't mess with Sheryl Sandberg. All right? But look at that. And that number is much higher now. And it's not slowing down. All right. How does it do it? This is how the advertising system works. You pick out attributes. This is someone buying an ad and trying to figure out exactly what the audience is going to be. This person decided to buy an ad in the United States in the following cities: LA, San Diego, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Austin, Seattle, and people who are interested in advertising, search engine marketing, pay-per-click, social media optimization, people who hold the title or have held the title of founder, CEO, or co-founder. For some reason, this person only wants single people. And the age range is 24 to 32. So this person wants young, single CEOs. There's probably not a lot, right? But you're not looking for a lot. You're looking for the right people to get the right message. So whatever this final ad is going to be in terms of content is going to be tailored to that single, fairly wealthy CEO startup person in Seattle or Austin or San Francisco or LA, right? Male, of course, right? And English. That's a pretty precise ad. Look, 6,700 Facebook users in the United States match all of these attributes. That's pretty efficient. You can reach all those people for a few $100s. And you can try out different versions of an ad to see what works. And this person is probably a consultant trying to sell consulting services. That's really powerful and efficient. Now, imagine if this person is trying to recruit people to a white supremacist group. Well, you can do all kinds of tweaking of this, location, interests. You can actually exclude people who are Jewish. You can exclude people who are African American. You can do all of the, you can do include and exclude. Ethnicity, religion, gender, all kinds of stuff. You should immediately be saying, what if this is a person who's renting apartments? Won't this violate the Fair Housing Act? As a matter of fact, it does. And ProPublica has found on multiple occasions that Facebook was allowing people to run housing ads that would discriminate against people of certain races and religions. And Facebook had no way of stopping it because it's too big. It says it stopped it now, but every once in a while people find that you can still run ads this way. But for decades, well, for a decade, Facebook was running ads like this, or allowing people to run ads like this. All right, and the political. Again, we've talked about a bunch of this in the preamble, which turned out to be the substantial part of my talk anyway. So here's what's going on in the world. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, is the most successful Facebook politician in the world. He's also, I would say, the most successful politician in the world among people elected in democratic countries, because he has more people in his democratic country than any other democratic country in the world. Narendra Modi is dangerous. He has overseen violent pogroms against Muslims, both when he led the state of Gujarat in the 1990s, and he has turned a blind eye to similar instances of anti-Muslim violence in India since he's become prime minister. He runs a party called the BJP that is affiliated with and emerged from a group called Shiv Sena, which explicitly approves of Adolf Hitler. I mean, it's in its roots. A member of Shiv Sena, by the way, assassinated Mahatma Gandhi. This is the guy who runs the largest democracy in the world, and Mark Zuckerberg loves this guy. Why? Because he has more Facebook followers than anybody, ever. Narendra Modi, when he ran in 2014, ran his entire campaign on Facebook. What I just described to you earlier about how Donald Trump ran his campaign, Modi did it first. The very precise targeting, going for certain things in certain areas, churning up animosity against certain groups. But he did so much more than that. He invented the playbook. It goes like this. You do the standard advertising and propaganda distribution like I talked about before, but you also go after your critics and you spread propaganda about them, whether those critics are journalists or human rights activists or members of opposing parties. And then you top it all off with a campaign of harassment and threats. And you actually hire groups of people, like hundreds of people, to daily turn out online threats accusing people of all sorts of terrible things, doctoring videos to show them in sexual acts, accusing them of eating beef, which is now all of a sudden considered a capital offense in much of India, not officially, but by vigilante justice. You accuse someone of eating beef, that person might not live till the next day in some parts of India. And that's what's happening all over India. And it's a coordinated campaign by his political party using Facebook and WhatsApp. He has mastered it. And he is probably going to stay in power for many more years because of the grip he has over the imagination of voters in India through Facebook and WhatsApp. And he's not the only one. Rodrigo Duterte won his election as president of the Philippines in early 2016, and he basically just said, hey, I like what Modi did. I'm going to use the very same playbook. Again, you target propaganda through Facebook and WhatsApp at exactly your potential supporters, and Philippines is a very diverse place, lots of different islands with different concerns and different histories and even different languages. So you tailor it very specifically, and Facebook can do that. Almost no other media form can do that in a place like the Philippines. You go after NGOs, you go after human rights groups, you go after journalists, You discredit them. You also put them on their heels the whole time, accusing them all sorts of nonsense, so they're constantly defending themselves and they can't do work to go forward. Then you have that troll army, just like Modi did, and you go after people and you accuse them of terrible things and you issue death threats and kidnapping threats against their family and rape threats against themselves and their family. And again, this is happening all over the Philippines now, just like it happened in India. Similar campaigns are being run in Poland, in Hungary, in Turkey. The same playbook. It's an easy playbook. Facebook is perfectly built for this. Perfectly built for this. This is what we're facing. The worst case, of course, is in Myanmar, where the military junta did not allow any sort of digital communication until 2014, just after Aung San Suu Kyi was elected president. And she's in a very fragile agreement with the military where she gets to be the titular president as long as she doesn't deviate too much from the military's wishes. But she's also, it turns out, quite a nasty nationalist of her own, and she hates Muslims as much as the military junta does, as much as the Buddhist monks who control so much of cultural life in Myanmar. And they have all teamed up to generate the conditions that have led to essentially genocide of the Rohingya minority in Myanmar. Now, thing about that is, in Myanmar, as in the Philippines, as in Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, Kenya, all of these countries that are having tremendous pressure right now, facing the same sort of political movements. In all of these places, Facebook is the internet. There is nothing else. Facebook is everything. It's what people use to communicate with each other. End of story. It is how people get what we might almost qualify as news over everything else. End of story. It is everything. Why is it everything? Because Zuckerberg decided about 6 years ago that he wanted to change the world for the better. He wanted to introduce a not-for-profit wing that he called internet.org. And he created a suite of apps called Free Basics. And the idea was that, there are lots of places in the world where people don't have enough disposable cash to pay for expensive data plans the way that you and I do. They're paying month to month. They charge up their SIM cards, and partway through the month, they're out of data. And it's very frustrating. You can't run a business that way. You can't run a family that way if you're running out of data. You kind of need data to do basic stuff. So he said, you know what, I'm going to cut deals with telecom companies in the poorer nations of the world. And the deal is that the telecom companies will not charge their data down as long as people are using this specific suite of applications that Facebook will create, and it'll go under what's called Free Basics. So if you have a phone and you've got a SIM card, it's got a data plan, as long as you're using Facebook, it doesn't count against your data. It's called zero rating. It's great for Facebook. Facebook thinks this is great for people, and it might be, right? You can get access to Wikipedia, you can get access to Facebook, WhatsApp, a few other, like some medical resources, some farming resources, a lot of different resources, right? So this is kind of what it looks like in some places. It's different every place in the world. But like BBC News, the Baby Center, AP, but again, it's different places. AccuWeather, Bing, they're stuck with Bing. I can't even use Google. It's sad. Okay, but the deal here is this is trying to be the operating system of their lives, the only place they go, and it's working. Because of Free Basics, in places in the world like Kenya, Indonesia, Philippines, Cambodia, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Facebook is everything. All right, what's next? Artificial intelligence and virtual reality. These are the two big initiatives over the next 10 or 20 years, because what Mark Zuckerberg wants, which is the same thing that Apple wants, the same thing that Microsoft wants, the same thing that Amazon wants, the same thing that Google wants, is to be the operating system of your life. How does it get there? It gets there by making sure that you are attached to Facebook as much as possible. How does Google do it? Well, Google's trying to sell you all kinds of devices to put in your home, like Nest thermostats, like Google Talk, How does Amazon do it? Same way. A device that sits on your counter and listens to everything you say and all your snoring. How does Apple do it? Less aggressively. They're a lot more privacy friendly. But the idea is to just fill your life with devices. Put things on your skin, put things in your glasses, in your clothes, in your car, in your fridge, in your home, so that data flows throughout all of it, and eventually it's all controlled by one or two companies. And when everything is datafied, everything has data flowing through it, and there's only one or two companies doing this because it all has to be standardized, then you're constantly being monitored, you're constantly being manipulated, you're constantly being guided, you're constantly being engineered, and you're dependent on these one or two companies. At that point, those companies are the operating system of your life. We already had a race to see who would be the operating system, who would dominate the operating systems of our computers, and then our pocket devices, our phones and tablets. That's all done. That's all settled. That's boring. That's why we're seeing all these things like the Xbox, which does 80 different things now. Most people don't use it for 80 different things, much to Microsoft's chagrin, but it's best effort, right? This is the idea. Become the operating system of your life. This is a photo that that Facebook itself put out thinking that this would be an appealing vision. Right? It's like from a science fiction movie. I mean, like, I got this off the web. It says, photo by Facebook. Like, they think this is a positive image. All right, that's all I have. Let's talk some more. Thanks.